Hey guys, and sorry we are a couple minutes late. We were having some issues with the voice and I had to go wrangle my children. So thank you guys for tuning in to watching this week's author chat. This week we are with, is it Rosalyn or no?
Yes, it's Rosalyn, but I answered anything close.
I have been on it for all the names this last couple of weeks with the author chat, and she is the amazing author of Blood Rose Rebellion. I will get it straight sooner or later. It's like it's horrible. I was looking right at it and I still say the wrong title. It's
okay. There's lots of titles to remember. I get it.
All right, so make sure you guys go to the site and you can enter to win a giveaway of 2 sets of, we got paperbacks of the first 2 and then a hardback of the third one. And I've got 2 sets of these to give away. So make sure to go and enter. All right, so we're gonna get into this and we're gonna start off. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So, of course, the first question that we ask everybody is tell us a little bit about you and your series.
Okay, a little bit about me. I never feel like I'm as interesting as my books, but I am an English professor and a writer. So I teach composition classes at a small public university in southern Utah. I've got 3 kids. I like reading. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. But my books feature, let me back up a little bit. The main idea behind the books is a young woman who's born into society in 19th century Europe, where most of the people around her, most of the nobility, have magic and can cast spells, but for whatever reason, she can't cast spells, but she has sort of an uncanny ability to break the spells that other people cast. This ability to break spells gets her into all kinds of trouble. In the first book, hence the title of the book, it gets her involved in the Hungarian Revolution, only it doesn't play out like the actual historical revolution does, because, of course, if you add magic to things, it makes things more complicated. And then the next 2 books are sort of the aftermath of that revolution. What happens when you think you get what you want, but it's not really what you expected, and how do you come back from that?
All right.
Me and my books.
All right, so now that your trilogy is completed and published and released, are you taking a break from writing, or are you diving into whatever your next project is?
I'm still writing. I have one project that my editor is currently reading right now, and so I'm waiting for feedback on that one. And then I have a Regency romance that I'm writing just for me, just for fun, to sort of fill the time while I'm waiting for my editor. And starting to brainstorm something new. I think there's always that. There are some authors who have so many ideas that they're like, I will never be able to write all of my ideas. I'm not one of those ideas. If I get a good idea, I usually run with it. So there's always a moment after I finish one thing where it's like, do I have any more ideas? Was that it for me? But I do have an idea that's sort of starting to come together that I'm excited about. So it's fun. So I'm still working on stuff, but mostly waiting for edits.
Awesome. All right. So can you describe your series in 3 words or less?
Okay, let me think about this for a minute. I would probably say magic, mayhem, and monsters. Does that work?
That works.
One of my favorite parts about the book series is working with folklore a little bit, and some of the monsters that come out of folklore, and then weaving them into the real world. That was a lot of research, and it's been a lot of fun to write.
Right. All right. So let's see. This is a pretty long question that we got.
Okay.
How hard was it to write a series is the first part, and then how did you keep it all of the story together? I kind of imagine people's houses for authors who do series with large planning plot boards all over their houses.
All of my planning and plot boards, well, no, that's not true. When I was plotting the second one, I did resort to an actual plot board with sticky notes because I was having trouble getting everything straight in my head. So I did resort to an actual plot board. Most of my timelines and stuff are on my laptop. So I would be in trouble if anybody stole it. Although I do try and remember to save a backup copy. So writing a series, I followed the advice that everybody gave me, which was if you're thinking of writing a series, you write the first book as a standalone and then let your agent or editor query it that way. So when my editor picked up the book and decided she wanted it as a trilogy, I was really excited until I realized that meant I had to actually write the whole trilogy. And the first book was actually done. And I had rough ideas for the second and third book. We'd sent my editor like a 2-paragraph synopsis for each book. But let me tell you, 2 paragraphs is not very much help when you have to write a 350-page book. So, so the first book was relatively easy because it was a standalone book. The second two, especially the second one, I would say was quite hard for me trying to figure out. Because if you know how books work, you know, the arc of a book, you usually have the first act that introduces the conflict, and then the middle, and then the conclusion where things get exciting again. And most authors struggle with the middle because you want to keep it engaging and exciting, but you're really trying to get from the exciting beginning to the exciting end. And I realized about halfway through book 2 that book 2 was the middle. It was like an entire book based around the middle. And so the challenge for that was to give it its own story arc, something that would feel satisfying and complete to readers, but also that sets up the conflict for book 3, that also makes sense in the context of book 2. And it took me a long time to get that right. I think I got about 2/3 of the way through the book and realized this isn't working. So I went back and replotted it and figured it out and rewrote it. I think what really helped me was realizing that if it's the middle of the book, then book 2 should end at that classic dark night of the soul, right? That the low point. I think the low point in a trilogy should kind of come right at the end of the book 2. And so when I realized, oh, this book is a tragedy, you know, it doesn't end by them getting everything they want. It ends by everybody getting in more trouble. Then I kind of was able to figure out. Check on that. Then I was able to figure out.
Kids home.
Yeah, that mom sounds very familiar. So the third book, by comparison, wasn't that hard because the third book was just fixing and following through on all of the trouble and obstacles that I introduced in book 2. But writing that middle book was really hard. And it was also my second contracted book, which if you talk to most published writers, that second book is really hard. That's usually when all the questions and anxiety hit. It's usually your first time writing a book under contract with deadlines while you're drafting. I mean, the first book, I didn't have any deadlines. Nobody knew I was writing it. So that was tricky.
I bet it sounds tricky. So did you have to like go back and like like physically read book 1 again or anything, or you just went with what you
did? I had to revisit some of book 1. I had taken a lot of notes, and I have like a world building Bible that has like the characters and things about the world and the magic system. So I relied on that pretty heavily. But I did have to plot the other 2 books pretty extensively, and I had like these Excel spreadsheets that had timelines of like, here's what was going on in the real world. Here's how my magic timeline differs from the real world. And here's what all the characters were doing while all of these other things were going on, just so I could keep it straight in my head.
That's kind of cool, though.
It was fun. I mean, research is my favorite part because you can't get the research wrong, right? Nobody's going to be like, well, you didn't do that research, right? Where they might you write a scene, but the research is sort of this judgment-free and really easy way to procrastinate writing.
But I mean, like the timeline thing, that would have been kind of something interesting to add to like maybe like the paperback of the third book when it comes out, like it and have like a timeline of everything that was going on. That would be really kind of cool.
But then I would have to clean up the timeline. The timeline I had was pretty messy because I was the only one that needed to see it. But that is a good idea. I should ask my editor about that.
That's really cool. I know, I do not remember what book it was, but I know another book did that they had like a full timeline of everything that was going on.
Like what happened and
yeah. I don't remember what the book is now though. That's gonna bug me. Okay, so let's see. The next question is, oh, well, actually, do authors read their books? You as an author, do you ever read your own books?
I try not to. Sometimes you have to. I think maybe in a couple of years. I remember reading an exchange between Neil Gaiman and Victoria Schwab that I thought was really interesting because she had started out by asking, like, do you ever get to where you really love your old books? You know, because if you're doing the author thing right, in theory, you get better with every book that you write. Um, and he said, no, you don't really. But he said, but you do sort of develop a kind of fondness for your first books. And and I think he said that you have to remember that that book represents the best that you could do at the time you were writing it. But for me, it's hard to go back because I think so. I'm also an English teacher, and I tell my students all the time that writing is never finished; it's just due. You know, there are research papers they turn in; they could always be better, but there at some point it's due, and you have to turn it in. And I think it's the same thing with books. Sometimes it's due. At some point, it's due to your editor, and it's the best that you can make it at that point. And maybe if you had another 5 years, you could make it even better. But it's, you know, there's not a great return on investment after a certain point. It's time to move on and do something better. But that does mean that if I go back and read my books, there are always things I want to change. I tried listening to the audiobook of the second one because they have some really fantastic, Penguin Random House got some really fantastic audiobook narrators. And I made it about 45 minutes in and realized that I was anticipating every line of dialogue and that I was mentally editing it in my head. And I can't do this.
It's like actors, they don't watch their own movies.
Yeah, because I think you always see things that you would want to change or do differently or so no, I'm hoping that maybe in a few years I can pick it up and read it and it won't be like I remember everything and then
Right.
it'll be a surprise.
Right. So I don't have that problem with reading because I read so much. I can read a book, and if you ask me a week later if I remember the characters or anything from that book, it's a good book. You need to go buy that book because I remember
I do that. But it's harder with a book that you wrote because you got it. And although even then, I've been to author talks before where fans in the audience clearly knew more about the world and the series than the author remembered. Because for the author, that was 3 or 4 books.
Yeah, like how long ago.
Right there and present.
Yeah.
And when a reader corrects an author on, no, that's not really how it happened.
I remember I had gone to a event down in Miami and that had happened. And it's like, you know, that readers have to understand that, you know, okay, this book might have just been published, but, you know, I haven't looked at this book for like, you know, 6 months, a year, 2 years.
Right.
You know, I haven't seen this for how long. So, you know, I'm working on, you know, 3 books down the line from this one. So it's not fresh in my mind anymore. And I think a lot of readers don't understand that, you know, and they're like, oh, well, why don't you remember this? And it's like, you know, because it's not, I'm not working on that specific book anymore.
Right. And your brain can only hold so many details. So sometimes it gets rid of some of those to make way for other ones. But I haven't hit that stage yet. I haven't had somebody ask me a question that I couldn't answer yet, but I only have one series out. So it makes to keep the details.
I couldn't see how people who write multiple series, you know, how they're not getting, you know, one thing from this series mixed in with the other series that they're writing.
Well, I know that at least I have a friend who works as a reader for Brandon Sanderson. Like he actually has a dedicated fan group that he has read all of his books to help him.
Wow.
Great. So that's like author goals, right? If you're making enough money, hire people back to check your own series.
At that point, you kind of need it.
Right.
There comes a point where you just need a group of people to read all your stuff and take notes and be like, no, this is, you need to fix this.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Our next question is, since this series is historical fantasy, which do you think plays a bigger role in the story, the historical part or the fantasy part?
Oh, that's a really good question. Honestly, I think they're kind of equal. One of my goals when I was doing the research and writing for this is, I mean, it doesn't follow the historical timeline exactly, but I tried to keep some of the historical details right. Like what I could find about the actual historical people, I tried to keep that as accurate as I could based on different records. And I wanted to give the feel of the time place. So as much as possible, like reading contemporary novels or reading travel narratives of people who went to the area and the things that they saw and felt. I tried to keep those details as real as possible. So then I could fudge a little bit on the timeline, but it would still feel like this could have actually happened in a historical time period. Of course, the magic makes it, it wouldn't actually have happened that way, but I wanted it to feel as real as possible. But then, of course, I mean, the magic plays a big role too, because the plot wouldn't have happened the way it did without the magic. And the magic changed the revolution and changed the war that followed that in distinct ways, because it changes a little bit who was involved and what their motivations were. So I don't know. I think for me, they both matter. And that's why I like historical fantasy, because I like reading straight fantasy too, but I also really love that feeling of magic in our world, because it makes it feel like magic is possible.
It does. It really has like a nice blend to it.
Hmm.
Okay, the next question is, let's see if I can read my handwriting here.
I have that problem too sometimes.
If you had to choose another timeline and world to create a new series in, what would you choose and why?
It's like a real world timeline.
Yeah, like you did with this one. This is what, Hungarian, right? Or
What
no?
was that?
This one
Yeah,
is
this is Hungarian. Yeah.
yeah.
Ooh, that's a really good question. Um, it would probably be 19th century something, because I'm kind of fascinated by the 19th century. I have thought it would be fun to do something with like the Pre-Raphaelite group of artists in England. Um, I haven't quite figured out how I would bring magic into that, but I think that 1840s, 1850s, Queen Victoria, the industrial era, everything was changing so rapidly in England. I think it's a really interesting time period. And I also, I did my graduate work on the American West, and that's where I currently live too. And so I would think it would be fun to do something with that period as well. I'm actually working on a straight up historical right now that's set in 1878 around the eclipse that went through Wyoming and Denver. But that one doesn't have any magic in it, so I would have to think about how I would change the
So
timeline.
add magic to that though, dealing with the lunar eclipse or the
I know.
sun
I
eclipse.
initially thought it would have magic, and the more I wrote, I don't know, stories are funny things. Like some stories ask for it, and this story was
Mhm.
no. So
Gotta do what the story wants. All right, your next question is, what are you currently reading?
oh, what am I reading? I've been reading a whole bunch of adult contemporary romance recently. I'm not sure why. Actually, no, I do know why. The last couple of weeks have been really busy and intense. I had a book launch 2 weeks ago, and then last week I had a big job interview. And so the two things together, I'm like, I need to read something that is a total escape from what I'm doing in my real professional life. And so I've been reading contemporary romance. So I read Alyssa Cole's A Duke by Default, and then she has a novella that's set in the same world. And I read Jennifer Crusoe's Bet Me, which is an older one, but one of my friends recommended it because it has a plus size heroine. And that was fun to read. Like
Mm-hmm.
bigger, but everybody sees her still as like attractive and sexy. Anyway, those are fun because you know what you're getting. You're getting a happily ever after. And
I love those though.
yes,
Well,
I
I
do
don't
too.
read a lot of adult books, but one of my favorite series, it's paranormal. It's paranormal romance. Is by Shirley Kenyon. It's the Dark Hunter
Oh,
series.
I've heard of them.
It's like
Yeah.
goes the same way. You automatically know, okay, this story is set with these two people. They're gonna have their issues and stuff. There's gonna be danger, but they are going to end up together, live, do, or die. It's just the
And
way it's
sometimes I really want that. And yeah, without the complications of anyway.
wondering if they're gonna end up together.
I have a really
It's
long list of stuff on my TBR right now, but that's what I've been reading is contemporary romance, which I would be terrible at writing, by the way. I think that's why I like reading them, because there's no chance of me comparing my writing to what I'm reading, which I
mm-hmm.
when I write YA fantasy. So I have to be careful how much that I read when I'm drafting.
It's like
Like,
go back and read something. Whoa, that shouldn't be in there.
oh,
Okay, let's delete.
right. Or even just like Laini Taylor or Holly Black, right? I read one of their books and this beautiful, gorgeous, polished book, and then I go back to my really messy, ugly draft and go, why am I doing this? So I usually read historical or contemporary when I'm drafting so that I don't do that comparison.
Mm-hmm. All right. Your next question is, how long did it take you to finish the series start to finish?
About 6 years, because I started, my youngest is 6, he'll be 7 this summer, and I started writing the series just before he was born, I think. And I really started writing it when he was a baby. So he kind of grew up with me writing the series. And it took, the first book took the longest because I was writing it on my own. I didn't have an agent when I was writing it. So that took 18 months to draft and revise, and then a few more months to query, and then, a couple more months after that before it sold. And the other 2 books, I didn't have nearly as much time to write, but the other 2 books typically took about 18 months from starting to draft to getting through the end of revisions.
Do you think that it would have been better to know offhand that it was going to be a series and maybe write all 3 books at once and then sell it? Or do you think it's better to just the one book, find out that it's going to be a series, and then write the next 2 books?
In some ways, the writing of it would have been easier if I'd written it all at once because there wouldn't have been that same pressure. It would have been just me writing for fun. But I do think there's something to be said about just write the first one until you know what the fate of the series is, because I know people who've written entire trilogies that haven't sold, and it's good practice, but then you've written these books that, unless you decide to self-publish them, they're just going to sit there. So I do think it's good advice. And then too, I think fantasy, especially in YA, we're starting to see a lot more duologies than trilogies. I think mine the last gasp of the trilogy sales. And so it would also be kind of a pain if you've written 3 books and then your editor goes, we want to buy this, but we only want 2 books. And then you have to figure out how to
cut it down.
Too.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of books come out recently that have been standalones too. And it's I'm so used to almost everything on my shelf is a series. And it's it's so weird how things are changing.
Yeah. Well, I will say, after writing a trilogy, when my agent asked me, what are you going to work on next? He wanted me to give him some ideas to send to my editor about what we were going to do next. I sent him 3 different ideas, and they were all standalones. I don't know that I did that on purpose, but I realized that after the fact. I was like, oh, I think I must need a break from writing a series for a little bit.
I'm done. I just want to work on one story, start to finish, and it's done. And I don't have to worry about it past that.
I think, I think especially writing that 3rd book, I think there was definitely a moment of, this has been a duology, I would be done already, or, a standalone, especially. I think the nice thing about, I like trilogies. I like series, but I find that I have a really hard time finishing them unless I really, really love them. And so I think standalones are great because they give you a chance to try an author's work. But then but then the next book is also something new. It's I don't know if that makes sense. It gives you another chance to win new readers, or.
It does. It does so much. I just sat down and did the entire Throne of Glass series earlier this year.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
That's a lot of books. And it's I know I had to cut out, so many weeks to be able to just finish it all at once, because especially a series that large, with as much as I read and stuff, there's no way I'm going to remember anything if I stop, read something else, and come back to it. So it's things like that I fully understand, especially, even if it's a short series, if it's, a very vast world or very integrated with all different characters and everything else, reading one book, stopping, waiting a year or so for the next book to come out, you're either going to have to reread it or, do a Hail Mary and hope you remember something and just start the next book.
I tried really hard in my books to assume that people read like I do, which is that I will have read the previous book months before and I will vaguely remember it. So I tried to write the assumption that they hadn't read the previous one recently, and give them, without hitting them on the head with, this is what you missed, trying to remind people of enough of the previous book that you'd be like, oh yeah, okay, now I'm caught up.
I think you did a really good job with that, because a lot of authors do it really, really badly, where they want to rehash almost everything that happened in the previous books within the first couple of chapters, where you get this
You don't need that.
Bump. And authors like you did it very lightly, and then you got Cassandra Clare, who did it very, very lightly.
Good, yeah.
I mean, those are a lot better, because then if you're like me and I just binge it all at once, you're not getting these, I can skip like the first 10 chapters of this book because it's all stuff that happened previously. That was actually really nice.
Yeah, that was deliberate, because I know based on my experience with as a reader, how those tend to go.
Right. Another really good site for that is I think it's called the Recaps or something, and they actually have, or the Recaptors, it's something like that. But they have an actual website where they take series and they'll give you like a whole rundown of everything that had happened in the previous book, so then you can just start the next one. And that came in really handy once I got really into the Throne of Glass series, and I was like, okay, what happened back in like book 2? And like, okay, go look here, go skim through it. Okay, so that's who that is, because there's a lot of coverage for like characters and stuff showing up later in the book, and it's like by that point I have no idea who this person is anymore. So it's a definite site, people watching, if you need a rehash of any series that you're reading, it's a great website to go check out. So your next question is, you're a mom of 3 kids, you work, and you're an author. How do you keep everything together, and how do you find time to write?
Honest answer, sometimes I don't. There are some weeks where it's sort of, you're putting out whatever fire is first, and that might mean that one of your kids is going through something and they need to be your priority. And it might mean that some weeks I have a lot of grading to do and I might not write that much that week. What I tend to have to do is, right now, my oldest is doing part school, part homeschool. It's weird. Anyway, but those hours, he's at school for a couple hours in the morning, and that's my writing time. That's not time for emails. That's not time to catch up on my grading, unless I'm like drowning in papers. That's my writing time. And I find that I have to protect that time. Otherwise, it's easy to get pushed behind other things. I think that's the main thing, is just scheduling out the different things that I have, but also being flexible and being gentle with myself, and knowing that there might be times, and there have been times, where I might not write for 2 weeks because of other stuff going on in my life. So it means that I write slower than some authors, but it's a trade-off that I made consciously. So it's a trade-off I have to deal with.
It's like, go to bed an hour early, get up an hour early, and like write. Yeah, I know I've seen a lot of authors that they have, what is it, the drag dictation app on the phone. So they'll actually just dictate stuff while they're doing laundry.
I have not figured out how to do that. Laundry for me is a good time to catch up on podcasts and stuff like that. Like it's still writing work. Like I usually get a lot of ideas while I'm listening to stuff like that. But I'm always impressed with people that can multitask like that. I'm not great at it.
I know people keep saying, oh, well, listen to audiobooks while you're, cleaning the house and stuff. And I'm like, yes, if I try to do that, I would probably, I would murder something, because I can't.
Your kids would.
Yeah, I can't keep my mind doing laundry or cooking and listening to a book at the same time. I would get into the book, and then I would burn down the house or something.
That is a very real danger. My husband listens to audiobooks while he cooks all the time, but I can only do it if it's something that I've done before and doesn't require a lot of attention.
Right. It's like, I can sit and do posts for my website and stuff and watch TV. That's fine. Nobody's in danger of that one.
Right.
All right. Your next question is, if you could write a companion novel to this series set in the same world, what 1 or 2 characters would you choose that novel to be in their points of view?
I would probably do Machash, mostly just because I have an idea for, I don't know if it's a short story or a novella that involves him, sort of like what happens to him immediately after the series concludes. So that's probably who I would go with of the characters from that book. I feel like Anna's story has been told. I'm happy with where her story ended up, but I feel like he still has part of the story that I could tell if I wanted to.
Now, I actually had a question about this. So the series is done, it's owned by you and the publisher and everything like that. Now, if you decided that, hey, you have this novella or short story or whatever, and you have it done, it's been, everything's been done with it, and you took it to your publisher and they decided that they didn't want to publish it, would you be able to publish that on your own? Or could you just like give it out for free, or what legally would you be allowed to do with that?
That's a really good question. I would have to, I'm sure that if I did something like that, I would have to ask my editor. I mean, in my head, it would probably be something free to get people to sign up for a newsletter. And I know it's doable because I know a lot of authors have done that. But yeah, I think as long as it's in that world, I would have to get the publisher's approval to do anything with it.
Okay. Always, it's like it's all the nicks and crannies that you don't know about publishing until you've actually gone through it.
Right. Until you run up against it. Yes, there's a lot of things like that.
Right, because I've heard things about like horror stories about like bookmarks and T-shirts and stuff where authors were selling it and then they got into trouble because it's not, like.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I didn't think about that because, it's your cover of your book. You would think you would be able to do what you want with it if you wanted to make up your own, products and stuff and sell them at events and stuff. You'd think you'd be able to do that, but I guess you're.
Oh, I can see that if you're using the image from your cover on a T-shirt and selling it, that might, because usually your publisher has paid somebody else for the rights
to create that.
But I have not run up against that yet, but I also haven't tried to sell anything, so that's good to know.
It's so strange. It's so strange because it's like you see all these people with like the fan art and stuff, and then they post on like Redbubble and all this stuff, and they're selling, the fan art and stuff that's set in a specific world. You would think that would not be allowed either, but it's
maybe because it's a fan adaptation. Like homages are allowable at copyright. I don't know.
So weird. It gets into that gray area.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about that
to really know what to do with it until you come across it. Okay, well, that is all of my questions for you today.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for letting me come.
Hope you join us again if you have another book coming out. I really enjoyed the series. You're one of my favorite authors.
Oh, thank you.
I had let's see if I can get the title correct. Blood Rose Rebellion. I had it when it was still the blue ARC.
Right.
Forever ago. Still kind of miss the blue, but I like the white too. It's pretty.
Well, you know what happened with that? That was, you hear stories about this, but that was Barnes and Noble. They said, we don't think it looks like a fantasy book.
Always Barnes and Noble.
They said we won't carry it if you keep the blue cover, so they changed it.
There was another book out that I had gotten in an ARC, and it was like The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, and then they changed the title of it and stuff because Barnes and Noble didn't like it, and I'm like,
yeah,
is just hating on everybody. It seems
they have a lot of power. So if they don't think that the cover will attract readers and whatever, then they'll say something. Yeah, I was surprised that they had enough power to do that, but.
I mean, the white and the gray really makes the colors pop on the cover. Like, the what is it? The bronze, the rose, red rose, and the gold. I mean, it really makes it stand out more. But I still do the blue. Just a little bit.
Yeah. I wonder what they would have done for background covers if they'd kept the blue. Because that blue definitely would not have gone with the orange bronze.
No, definitely not. Well, I don't know. Maybe they might have still gone with the bronze, maybe, or maybe made the Last Crow conspiracy black. Maybe, I don't know. That would be weird.
Be interesting. I'm curious about that.
That would really kind of clash. That would have been weird.
Yeah, I don't know. The cover design choices are always so fascinating to me, and to see how covers evolve. And because the first cover design they showed me looks very little like this one. It was a girl holding up her fist through a bunch of like Victorian looking flowers and roses. It actually looked a little bit like Aaron Beatty's Trader's Kiss, like those old fashioned kind of flowers that very different from what it ended up being. I like the cover that they ended with.
Yeah, I like the roses and stuff. This is really it's really pretty. And I love the last one, the tree. That is just
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
So pretty.
I feel bad because I didn't know until the first two books had the same designer and cover artist. And so I just assumed that the third book was, and it wasn't actually till I got the book in my hands and was looking at it that I went, oh, there's a different artist that has the credit for the third one. So the first two are one are Agent Bob, and the third one is, I would have to look it up, but the third one's somebody totally different. And I felt bad because I'd been telling everybody that the same artist did all three books. So
Did you get to do any input for the titles or the covers at all?
with the titles, I did. With the covers, it was mostly like, "Do you like this? Yes or no." Is about the extent of my input. But the titles, yeah, we went. The first title was easy, and the second and third ones we went around. The third one especially, we went around and around quite a bit. I hadn't realized when I picked out the title of the first one that I was setting myself up to. With the second two, we wanted to keep the what is it noun nominalization,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of keep the alliteration. And that made title options, especially for the third one, really difficult.
I really like what it came up with, what you guys came up
Yeah.
with. The
No, I
Winter
liked it
Awakening.
too.
That sounds
But
really
they're
cool.
actually my favorite title for that one was Silver Ash Ascendancy, but
That's
they
a tongue twister.
yeah, I think they were probably smart to go with this one, but it's always funny, like how is the author? I gave them a list of ideas, and then they went through with the staff and sort of, which one did most people like? So I got outvoted, which is probably a good thing.
Maybe for your next book, you could do something with the title, but I don't know, maybe figure out something for that last word. That's a tongue
Oh,
twister. But I like the first two. That was pretty.
yeah. Anyway,
All right. Well, thank you again so much for coming.
thank you for having me. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Hey guys, well, thank you so much again for Rosalyn for coming on. We don't have any more shows for this week. If there's an author out there that you want to have them on the show, tweet out to them and let them know that we have openings for the rest of this month. As of that, we will be back in May with Emily R. King. She wrote the amazing 100th Queen. I think it has a different series name, but for the life of me, I cannot remember what it is. So she wrote all of these, and then she also has a new book coming out, and I will tell you what that's called as soon as this thing comes back on.
Stars.
Before the Broken Star. She has that one coming out. So we will have a giveaway for, I'm pretty sure she said a set of the 100th Queen series as well as a copy of her newest book. And if you join us on the Facebook page this month, Cece Hunter is there talking about In Another Life for the rest of April. And I am out of here to go make sure the children have not murdered each other. And back to reading. Reading. That's all I'm doing today. And watching Sabrina, the Chilling Tales or Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. So really, really awesome. And I will catch you guys later. Bye.